Now I know there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this because every program is different. And now with this paper, we also emphasize that we have prevalence data to actually guide us in making more informed decisions. This guidance paper is really aimed to help anyone who's unfamiliar with this area, but are, luckily or unluckily tasked with managing it, and maybe those who have had long-standing health monitoring programs that haven't been reevaluated in a while.
Welcome to The Last Word, the official AALAS podcast dedicated to connecting and informing the laboratory animal science community. Each episode takes a closer look at recent articles published in our journals, JAAALS and LAS Pro, and features interviews with professionals advancing the field. I'm Jennifer Smith, your host. As a laboratory animal veterinarian and the Director of Education and Scientific Affairs at AALAS, I look forward to sharing these conversations with you. Let's discover something new together. Welcome. In this episode, I am joined by a new friend and colleague, Dr. Wai Hanson, DVM, PhD, and diplomat of the American College of Laboratory Animal Medicine. Dr. Hanson is a senior clinical veterinarian at Emory University. She earned her DVM and PhD from the University of Georgia and completed her lab animal medicine residency training at Emory University School of Medicine. Today, we are going to talk about her recently accepted JAAALS paper titled Guidance on Establishing Health Monitoring Panels for Laboratory Mice to Reflect Contemporary Pathogen Prevalence. Hello, Wai. I am so excited to meet you and have you on the podcast and to talk about this amazing review paper.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So tell us about yourself, kind of how you got into lab animal and how you got interested in taking on this impressive review paper.
Thank you. Sure. I first became interested in lab animal medicine after working with research animals during my PhD training. And then, so after I completed that program, I went on to vet school and then to specialize in lab animal. And then I kind of fell into the world of biosecurity and health monitoring, which is what this paper is about. And it was actually just kind of luck of timing and opportunity. When I was on externships during my clinical year of vet school, environmental health monitoring had just become a really hot topic and it was brand new. I learned about it at the different institutions I visited. So once I went back to Emory University for my residency, I chose to do my residency research project in this area with my residency mentor. And the rest is kind of history from there. I was really encouraged by the results that I got from my own research project, as well as other people's research projects that were coming out really fast at the time, one after the other. And I think the results were really encouraging. And I really valued the fact that we could replace so many sentinel animals with environmental samples. So that's kind of where my interest guided me into this area.
Oh, I love that. I love just hearing the background, and everyone that comes on the podcast is such a great background story. And I love hearing that you had a PhD first and then went to vet school, because that's not always the case either. So I really enjoyed hearing that. And I really enjoyed, I think you said it so well in that, timing sometimes in our life and careers is everything. And what a great time for you to be coming up right when this environmental monitoring, kind of took off. That's so crazy because, and it's funny, you're like the first person that I've interviewed that kind of came up right during that time, because so many of us have been in the industry. And so, we were in programs that were so entrenched in sentinel animals that, we were maybe a little bit of naysayers to the environmental health monitoring craze, right? And so I just love that an up-and-comer kind of was like, hey, I'm evolving right during this time. I'm gonna ride the coattails and let's dig in and use all your expertise and experience to figure it out. I love that.
Yeah, I think the timing for me was personally really unique because during the first year of my residency, I was actually part of the team that euthanized and necropsied all of our sentinel animals. And then by the time I finished my training program, we had stopped using sentinels completely. I really felt that emotional toll performing all the necropsies the first time around, and then having that positive experience of now not having to use any animals. So that really affected me at a personal level.
Oh, yeah. Yes. You're bringing back a lot of memories for me. That is very much true. Yeah. Collecting the sentinels, taking them down to necropsy, and all of that work. And yeah, how amazing the environmental sampling sort of movement, although it's not a movement anymore. It's really firmly entrenched in what we do now, which is great. That is amazing. All right. Well, so this review paper is really good, and one of those people are gonna look back to for a long time, especially tables 1 and 2. And we're gonna get there. Spoiler alert to those tables, but we always start with having the author talk about the team, who did what and why, and anything you want to share about that. We'd love to hear more.
It was completely team effort, so I'll go through each one if that's okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
They've been great mentors and great people to work with, so I'd love to give them a shout out. So my co-authors on this paper are Brianne Hibble. She's a senior clinical veterinarian at the University of Utah. Chris Manuel, who is a senior associate director at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus. Christina Patton Brewer, who's a veterinarian and associate director at the University of Washington. Lise Phaneuf, who is a senior director at the Center for Phenogenomics, and Kareth Lukens, who is a director of rodent clinical services at the University of Chicago.
That is fantastic. Thank you for listing everybody and where they are. That's helpful for us.
So we work together as part of the 3R's Collaborative Rodent Health Monitoring Initiative, and that's where I met this great group of people. And this initiative really works to provide guidance, expertise, and a platform for the 3Rs, specifically with advances in rodent health monitoring. And so that's how this group came together. And it was definitely a group effort. Everyone contributed, and we somehow, between the 6 of us, came up with some consensus that we presented in this paper.
Oh, that's great. I love that. I love that last summary, because you're right.
It's hard, isn't it? Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, but you're in great company, so that's great. All right, so since this is a review article, which is sometimes a little different than we usually have on the podcast, it would be great for maybe you to just kind of set the stage on what you and your collaborators, decided, like why take this on now, and sort of how you got it going.
Yeah, so our team noticed a couple things as we're, again, like I said, trying to encourage others to reevaluate their health monitoring programs. We received a lot of feedback, we received a lot of questions, and that those questions kind of encourage us to publish this paper. So first, there is not a lot of consensus on what agents should be tested for in a health monitoring program. So AALAS and PhilASA put out some great recommendations, but this was our attempt to try to put some recommendations out there as well for perhaps more of our US-based institutions.
All right. So this paper does a really good job of defining some of these key terms and some of the things that we're going to talk about. So it would be great if you could help us set the stage and sort of define some of that for us.
Our group, at the very beginning of the paper, we want to clarify and define some of the terms that we're using throughout the paper. So we clarify that your testing list might not be the same as your exclusion list. So, for example, very few people routinely test for K virus because it's such a low prevalence in modern colonies. But it's definitely an agent that we would not tolerate if it was found. And so that agent is actually excluded, but not routinely tested for. And then on the flip side, sometimes you might want to test for something for your own knowledge or to monitor the status of an agent, but it's not actually excluded from your colony. And a very common example of this is murine norovirus, or MNV, where you might want to see that it's or know that it's sticking around, but you are not going to actively do anything to remove it from your colony.
Thanks for defining that for us. That's going to be really helpful as we go through the rest of this review paper. I appreciate that effort, and I know others reading this review paper will appreciate that as well.
I'll also add a second thing that we noticed is that a lot of new hires, especially those coming right out of a training program, they're often given the task of reevaluating the institution's health monitoring program and told you can make any changes necessary. And I was one of these fresh graduates. And even with my research project being in this area, I struggled with deciding what changes I wanted to make or whether I should be changing anything at all. And it was honestly kind of daunting to go through every single pathogen and try to decide, should I test for it? How often should I test for? I think as any new graduate, my initial thought was, well, what is everyone else doing? But now I know there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this because every program is different. And now with this paper, we also emphasize that we have prevalence data to actually guide us in making more informed decisions. This guidance paper is really aimed to help anyone who's unfamiliar with this area, but are, luckily or unluckily tasked with managing it, and maybe those who have had long-standing health monitoring programs that haven't been reevaluated in a while.
It's time for a quick break to hear about the AALAS Learning Library. Hey, are you ready to elevate your team's knowledge and skills in laboratory animal science? Well, the AALAS Learning Library is your one-stop solution for comprehensive training. With courses designed for everyone, you can train your entire team in one place, earn valuable AALAS CEUs and RACE CE credits, and take advantage of group discounts to maximize that investment. Getting started is easy too. Sign up for free to access select courses instantly to explore a vast library of resources. Empower your team, stay ahead of the field, and grow with the AALAS Learning Library, your trusted resource for laboratory animal science professionals. I think that's so important. And, as a lab animal vet, you're right. That's probably like one of the first things that you get thrust on you when you join a program, right? And I feel like, looking back in my career, that was like the first thing when I started was, hey, here's health monitoring program.
Really?
What do you think?
It's daunting.
It is daunting. You are absolutely right. It's daunting. And then you're right. The first thing you do is phone a friend, look around, do a lit search, and then, to no avail sometimes. And then again, like we're going to talk about, you guys have so eloquently described the fact that it isn't a one-size-fits-all. And so what works over here is not necessarily appropriate over here. So I want to get into this. All right. One of the things I think that was really interesting is you guys reference this comprehensive review by a, in quotes, commercial diagnostic company. But I love that you discussed that because I think that was a great body of work. And I think that there's so much information from that when you think about a commercial diagnostic company just basically summarizing their data from the last 20 years or whatever. I can't remember the amount of time, but that's a lot of data of what they've seen. And so I'd love to hear sort of how you guys sort of took that on and what you kind of thought of that.
Yeah, we're really lucky that they have so much data. And again, it kind of spans multiple institutions. So it's not just my particular institution. So it's very widespread data. I think people might be surprised in reading this paper that we're actually suggesting that they streamline the agents that they test for. This actually might be a hot topic because of, financial pressures that we have currently. This might perk some ears up saying you can save money by streamlining the panels and the agents that you test for. So that's one of the big focuses of this paper is potentially not testing for as much as you used to test for. With this prevalence data, there are some pathogens that just have such an extremely low prevalence in modern day colonies that you could remove them. You could decrease testing and make them annual, or you can actually not routinely test them at all. So the most important area to not compromise on is quarantine. So this entry point has such a high risk for pathogen entry. So this is not an area to cut costs. But once you've thoroughly vetted the animals entering your population, then potentially you could reduce the amount of routine testing that you're doing on your colony. So I think the prevalence data has really helped us consider where we are today and if we should now be updating what we're testing for based on, the last 5 years of agents instead of the last 20 years of agents.
Oh, that is so well said. It just my mind is spinning, just thinking through like, wow, what a unique and fresh approach to this. Wow. All right. So I would say reading this paper, this wonderful review paper, that the key kind of takeaways are these tables 1 and 2. And I think that's probably what most people wanna know more about. Could you break those down for us and sort of what conclusions you guys were able to sort of agree on to put into those 2 tables?
Yeah. So table 1 is our list of recommended infectious agents for testing and exclusion in all programs. This is just at minimum. These are the ones we are concerned about, and these are the ones we recommend that everybody keeps testing for. And you can see it's broken down into quarterly agents and annually tested agents. And yes, the 6 of us did come to a consensus about this, and this is the consensus. Table 2 are recommended agents to test for if you have specific scenarios or programs within your program that might make you concerned about some additional pathogens. So, for example, if your program includes cancer research, then testing biological materials and those pathogens will be very relevant to you. Versus if your facility is very old and you have difficulty managing pest control, then you might want to consider testing for agents that are prevalent in wild rodents and pests. And so table 2 kind of breaks down these different areas of a program that might add to your routine testing. So similarly, if you are trying to maintain a barrier facility for immunocompromised mice, then there are some additional agents that you might want to consider testing for. And then I wanted to clarify that between the 6 of us, these were the recommendations that we all agreed on, but it doesn't mean that the 6 of us have the same exact testing list at our programs. So instead, we were able to provide rationale to each other for why I may test for something, but Brianne doesn't, or why Kareth feels like an agent is a concern for her program, but Chris is not concerned for his program. So I think that is really the exercise that we're trying to recommend people do. We won't all have the same program, but you need to be comfortable with the rationale for why you are testing for something and at what frequency you're testing it for.
Yeah, and that seems to be really the takeaway here, right? Use tables 1 and 2, of course, as guidance, but unfortunately, you still got to kind of do the work, which is interestingly very similar to performance data for things like guide exceptions. And we've all heard that before, and I think that bears repeating, of course, right? There is no one size fits all. But I appreciate that. So we would love to know, inquiring minds would love to know what were some of the most hotly debated agents or frequencies? Did it ever get scrappy with the 6 of you?
I think the barrier facility and the immunocompromised animals, there's such a range of how SPF do you want to get, how clean are you trying to get your animals? Of course, you can have them clear of everything. You can put what we call everything in the kitchen sink on your testing panel for those animals, but also you do need to balance, realistically the cost of this testing. So that area had a bit of flexibility. We did choose specifically things that we thought would have a clinical impact or a strong research impact on immunocompromised animals if the agent was found. So those were the ones we went with. But of course, the list for immunocompromised animals could go on and on, depending on how clean you want them.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And what about the same sort of thing for just agents in general? Were there agents that, really sparked a lot of discussion? Is it, are we back to talking, about certain agents like MNV, or was it more of a holistic approach?
Yeah, I think for the Table 1 agents, there was some debate there as well. Actually, one of the authors has already removed some of these agents from her testing panel entirely. She tests for them on quarantine. Of course, the vendors test for them, and then she never tests for them again routinely. And she justified that the prevalence is extremely low and the risk of this is, not very high at all. So to streamline her panel, to save money, that is what she decided to do. And then for the rest of us, if you asked us with this data, why aren't you doing it? I'm going to give you a really human answer. I'm scared. I'm scared to remove these agents from my list. So even between the 6 of us, we have different comfort levels of what we're willing to remove from our testing panels.
And I love that you're human, of course, and that you're afraid, because I'd be afraid too. And maybe it's not so much of being afraid, but it's also you're overseeing a program. There's a large investment, and you have to answer to people on, why we're making this choice versus that choice. And it's amazing how some of us have very short memory. No, I should say long memories when it comes to, I remember when we had this and we, had to eradicate it. So you probably have to fight against that a little bit too in that decision. Yeah. Oh, well, this has been so interesting and amazing just to hear how 6 really bright people attacked this problem. And we all thank you for doing that and for getting it on paper and something that we then can use as kind of this, hey, this is kind of what experts say, and let's use this as a beginning to have a discussion at our own facilities, which is important. In your discussions, did you talk a lot about how the animals were housed? Housing mice, conventionally IBC, or, any of those conversations come into this?
I will say the focus of this paper was specifically on the different agents that you could test on your health monitoring program. And we kind of stayed away from methods of health monitoring. I think that's kind of where your question is going, if there's a difference between IVC and static housing. But since the methodology of health monitoring is covered in a lot of other publications, we kind of stayed away from that and focused on the pathogens, the pests, and the parasites that we recommend testing for. And so overall, I guess I don't particularly see a difference between housing types other than what health status are you trying to achieve in each population?
Yeah. And I think you've given us such a great roadmap to be able to do that with other species. So I really like that answer. All right. Well, we ask our guests a final question, and I had a good one for you, which was kind of the basic one about what advice would you give somebody setting up a health monitoring program? But you know what? I think we're past that now, because we know that you need to do the work. But I would like to know, and I'm sure our listeners would like to know, this important review paper was for mice, and we probably want to know if your group of experts at all is considering doing this for rats, other species.
We haven't discussed doing it for rats. It was a very early question when we started working on this. Do we want to include rats? As I gave a little insight to some of our discussions, we had a tough time agreeing on some things. So we immediately was like, okay, let's just focus on mice. I think mice is probably more of the least consensus among the programs. I guess we're happy to do it with rats. I will say our intention was for readers to then apply this exercise to rats. So, with the tools and the process in place, having readers apply it to whichever species they feel is appropriate.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What agents and then how to test for them. And I really love how in your discussion, you guys broke down those specific things like, wild rodents, import, export, those types of, specific areas where you need to have a discussion. So, it's quite interesting. All right. Well, Wai, thank you so much for joining me today. This was really fun, and it was a great review paper. And I don't always get to pull these for the podcast, so I'm just so thankful that we were able to sort of work through it, and you were able to provide some really good insight. Thank you to your collaborators as well. I would love to have been a fly on the wall with some of these discussions. I'm sure they were fun. But at the end of the day, you guys put together an amazing review paper for us and something that we can really sink our teeth into as we move forward with how do we set up these programs or evaluate the programs that were existing. And so we really appreciate that. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you again for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Last Word. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so be sure to leave your feedback in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more great content. We encourage you to submit your research manuscripts to our journals, JAALS and LAS Pro. We're always looking to feature impactful studies. You can also connect with us on our social media channels or email us directly at info@aalas.org. We appreciate your listening today, and we'll see you next time on The Last Word, an AALAS podcast. Until then, stay curious and stay connected.